High-income earners going broke at record rates now. Late last month, a report published by Goldman Sachs caused a bit of a firestorm in the personal finance community when it found that 40% of people earning more than $500,000 a year were still living paycheck to paycheck. What was even more shocking from the same group of high-income earners is that less than a third of them reported that they were consistently able to make contributions to long-term financial goals like paying down debt or saving for retirement. Now, I know it might be extremely hard to feel too bad about the financial struggles of people earning 10 times the median income, and the general response to this report online was, well, not too sympathetic, to put it mildly. But it does reveal a lot about the way our economy has fundamentally changed since this report was first published just 10 years ago. History is of course filled with endless cautionary stories about people who have blown through enormous fortunes spectacularly, but these have traditionally been rare exceptions to the rule, and these stories have mostly come from athletes, celebrities, and lottery winners. Essentially, people who make a lot of money in a very short period of time and then get themselves into serious trouble by assuming that they will always make that much money indefinitely. In the past, most financial professionals would generally agree that beyond a certain income level, you can just brute force your way through a lot of genuinely dumb financial decisions. And as long as you maintain that high income, you'd have to try pretty hard to not get richer every single year. But today, financial hardship amongst the top 1% of income earners has gone from a rare cautionary tale to the statistical majority. And ironically, one of the biggest groups contributing to this trend are those same financial professionals who should theoretically know better. So if this data from Goldman Sachs is to be believed, one of two things have happened. Either rich people have gotten dramatically dumber with their money management over the last decade, or certain industries have just gotten a lot better and more sophisticated at taking money from them systematically. Sometimes, when parsing through complex economic data, it's important to see the funny side in it all. And one of the funniest developments of the last decade is the growing levels of inequality amongst the top 1% themselves. According to studies conducted by UBS and Allianz, there are between 50 and 60 million millionaires in the world at the moment. But even amongst this group of extremely wealthy global residents, the top 1% amongst them still holds almost a third of their collective wealth. Now, these studies were tracking accumulated wealth rather than annual income, but the data still showed the same fundamental problem. Nobody feels poorer every single day than really rich people, surrounded by even richer people, except for very particular careers like service staff who interact with diverse income groups. People overwhelmingly interact with other people from within their general income grouping. If you work an upper-middle-class professional job, there is a good chance your partner also works a similar middle-class professional job. You will live in a neighborhood with other upper-middle-class professionals. Your friends from college would have gone on to get similar middle-class jobs. And your kids will probably go to school with other kids from other middle-class families. An article published by the Journal of Nature that tracked over 72 million Facebook connections found that socioeconomic status was the main determinant of who you were friends with. This means that day in and day out, you are going to interact almost exclusively with people living a somewhat similar lifestyle to your own. Sure, within this group, there will be some differences in take-home pay. Your neighbors might be a rung above you on the corporate ladder, and you might feel the need to keep up with their new cars or nice vacations. But apart from a few small details, people 10% below you and people 10% above you on the income distribution spectrum are going to live essentially the same kind of life. In other words, within your social circle, inequality usually isn't that extreme or visible. The study also found this to be true for households with the lowest incomes. They overwhelmingly interacted with other low-income households, which had a negative impact on economic mobility. The old adage of "it's who you know, not what you know," is unfortunately absolutely true. And if the only people you know aren't in a position to give you any special favors or opportunities, it's much harder to get ahead, regardless of ability or work ethic. But that's a separate issue that we don't have time to get into today. Where this gets really interesting, though, is by moving the scale all the way to the top of the income distribution. It's only here that extreme inequality becomes visible within a single decile of wealth. If you earn $500,000 a year as an analyst at a private equity firm, you are wealthy by almost anybody's standards. But compared to your general partner who is making $10 million a year, you are basically destitute in comparison. Nowhere else on the income spectrum would you be working alongside someone else that made 20 times more than you for doing similar work. That general partner will also be raising money from billionaire investors who, by comparison, make them look poor. And then when those mere single-digit billionaires fly to Davos for the World Economic Forum, they are going to be rubbing shoulders with other business people several hundred times richer than them. There are several orders of magnitude in income and wealth variance within just the top 1%, which means lifestyle comparison is far more psychologically damaging. If you work as a roofer, your colleagues might convince you that you need to lease a new F-150 truck to keep up appearances. If you work in a hedge fund, your colleagues might convince you to fly private to Art Basel for the networking opportunities. This is part of the reason why people making only $200,000 to $300,000 a year were doing significantly better financially in the Goldman Sachs study. On average, these people were still living in the real world and were largely exposed to other normal people with normal spending patterns. Demographers have dubbed this phenomenon socioeconomic fractality, and it was actually first observed by Vilfredo Pareto when he was poring over tax documents more than 100 years ago. You may know this guy from the Pareto principle or the 80-20 rule, so that's pretty cool. But in the 100 years since this pattern was first observed, some things have changed dramatically. Recent booms in global wealth have further divided this tiny group of wealthy people, and that's done two important things. The first is that it's created absolutely hilarious situations that you are all welcome to point and laugh at. Like this guy complaining in a local Palo Alto newspaper that billionaires building their mega machines were, and I quote, running roughshod over average millionaires like himself. This is unironically just one of many instances of millionaires complaining publicly about how hard they have it now. But while it's fun to laugh at the absurdity, there is something more substantial here. Inequality has always existed, and as dumbfounding as the recent spike in millionaires living paycheck to paycheck is, it does shine some light on some other concerning economic developments. Okay, so the extreme concentration of wealth at the very top of the distribution has become more pronounced over recent years, but it's not entirely new just by itself. Merely wealthy people have always been exposed to extremely wealthy people. Just because they have gone from being 100 times wealthier to 400 times wealthier doesn't really change the basic arithmetic of inadequacy. What this has changed, though, is how expensive it has become to be a rich person. Now, the most obvious example of this is the cities people are living in. Unless you are running your own business or working as a specialist doctor, there are really only a few cities in America with jobs that pay more than $500,000 a year. And the house prices in all of these cities are amongst the most expensive on the planet. If you want an average family home within commuting distance of Seattle, Silicon Valley, Manhattan, or even Miami, you are going to be paying 7 figures for the privilege. Put a 30-year mortgage on that, and then after income taxes, property taxes, and state taxes in most of these centers, that is going to leave you with around $50,000 a year in actual disposable income. Now, I know what you're thinking. $50,000 a year after taxes and housing are accounted for would be a dream for most families. And you would be absolutely right. But there are 2 reasons why, for many ultra-high income earners, it's not enough. The first reason is quite simply that just because someone is earning a high income does not mean that they are smart with money or even particularly intelligent in general. People who choose high-prestige careers are rather shockingly often motivated by, well, prestige, which means they will happily go into debt to keep up appearances around their peers. $50,000 after taxes and housing can easily pay for a comfortable lifestyle. But it doesn't cover a luxurious lifestyle. People who land high-income roles also have a sense of entitlement to these luxuries, since it often takes years of highly competitive schooling to get there. So once they have made it through all of that and landed their first real job, it's time to treat themselves. Of course, the career path where this is most common is medical doctors. An article published by the British Medical Journal, as well as a separate survey from the University of Pennsylvania, found that most American physicians were graduating medical school with practically zero financial literacy. And yes, despite the name, the British Medical Journal judges us here in America too. Anyway, this doesn't actually make doctors that unique by itself. Most people have practically zero financial literacy. The difference is that because of their much higher than average incomes, people like doctors are given access to far more dangerous financial tools right from the beginning. When you add in the fact that these young graduates are also already comfortable with having taken out six-figure debt to get through medical school in the first place, it's really easy for a bank to sell them a big home loan and a car loan on top of that. Even seasoned financial professionals can get in trouble with this stuff if they are not careful. So giving this much rope to someone without a clue is very dangerous. It would be like skipping through to the end of a very challenging video game and giving yourself a max-level character. Theoretically, you have all the right tools to deal with endgame content, but unless you actually know what you are doing, you can easily get yourself into trouble if even the smallest thing goes wrong. Now, doctors get a lot of attention for this because financial stress amongst practitioners has been connected to worse patient outcomes, which is bad for everybody. But they are not alone. Even finance professionals who should theoretically be good at this stuff frequently take on too much debt to keep up with everybody around them and find themselves living paycheck to paycheck. So yeah, high-income earners not being as smart as they think they are may come as a shock to them, but maybe not so much as a shock to you. But the second reason why financial hardship has become so common amongst these people is because companies have realized that this is where the money is now, and they have rushed in to fill any gaps in their budgets. The old team at Macro did a great video a few months ago about the hyperinflation of the hyperwealth. I will leave a link to it below if you are interested in the details. But the rough summary is that the number of products, services, and experiences dedicated exclusively to extremely wealthy people has exploded in recent years. 20 years ago, there was only one production car that retailed for more than $1 million, and that was the Bugatti. Today, even after accounting for inflation, there are more than 100 different models in this price range, and new offerings frequently cost in excess of $5 million. This is a clear example, but even for people at the plebeian end of the 1%, high-end hotels, credit cards, social clubs, sports events, clothing, airline seats, even high-end gyms and grocery stores have all developed to offer an exclusive service at a massively inflated price. Not all high-income earners will buy this stuff, and even those who do won't buy all of it. But the point is that there are more options than ever at the buffet of conspicuous consumption, and even $500,000 a year won't buy all you can eat like it used to. Now again, I know it's hard to feel too bad for these people, but all of this still comes with two very big, important caveats. The first is that the only reason why high-income household budgets are being targeted so hard is because the budgets of average incomes have already been optimally exploited. Between the various flavors of consumer debt and price increases, most people don't have that much left to give, which means companies are almost being forced to go upmarket to grow their revenue. I have mentioned it before, but even Walmart has attributed most of their recent sales growth to targeting higher-income consumers, since most other households have already been maxed out. High-income households are only starting to feel the pinch because everybody else has already been thoroughly juiced. And the final most important caveat is that a lot of these high-income households can still end up doing just fine in the long run. Their paycheck to paycheck isn't yet the same as everybody else's. Struggling to make the mortgage payments on a home in Seattle may be just as financially stressful as struggling to make rent, but in 30 years, those people should have fully paid off a home in one of the most expensive cities on the planet. High-income employees also get benefits like employer-funded retirement accounts or restricted stock units that can provide a scheduled liquidity boost, even if they are living paycheck to paycheck for the rest of the year to cover their living expenses. Wealth inequality and income inequality go hand in hand, because if you earn a high income, you can build up wealth faster than someone with a lower income. But what we are seeing today is thanks to massive asset price appreciation. You still won't be able to build wealth with your income faster than people can create income from their wealth. And remember, this is all just taking place within the top 1%. For everybody else, the situation is even more concerning. Do you feel sympathy for high earners living paycheck to paycheck? Or is this just karma? Share your perspective in the comments. Subscribe for more analysis on economic inequality, and let's discuss what this means for everyone else.